Critically speaking, therefore, you say there's a limit.
Yes.
To what monetary policy can achieve
exactly.
if there is no productive base from a fiscal point of view.
Yes. And this is what most people need. And this is a function of political leadership. So if you do not have a political leadership that recognizes this, you're not creating a productive economy. You're driving an inflation-prone economy by massive recurrent expenditures. And then you turn around and say, Central Bank, why isn't our monetary policy rate lower than it is? I think you're showing a certain fundamental lack of understanding, in my view.
So, you just touched on foreign exchange, which is at the heart of it all. You devoted a section of your presentation on Wednesday, the Institute of International Affairs, to what you call a foreign exchange conundrum. Yes. Explain this.
We have a massive foreign exchange conundrum in Nigeria. We know that the value of the naira is determined by mainly one commodity, and that is not what should be in a normal economy, and that is the price of a natural resource. That natural resource gives us dollars, and it is those dollars that determine the value of our legal tender. So the more reserves we have, the stronger the value of our currency. The fundamental economic question is this: when you are an import economy, it is very convenient to have a strong currency because everybody wants to import and they want to spend less importing. But at the end of the day, no wealth is being created for that country. What makes a country wealthy is exports. Therefore, when goods are exported, the country earns more. And that becomes the basis for a productive economy. So until we shift our economy, diversify our economy, not from oil into exporting yam tubers, no. Not from oil into exporting raw solid minerals, no. Not from oil into exporting raw cashew nuts, no. That is not economic transformation. What is necessary is productive manufacturing that is value added. And if you export that to West Africa and other African countries, you will be able to earn a lot of foreign currency. And that is how the value of the naira will be determined by market forces fairly and properly. So what we now have, the conundrum we have, is that because Nigerians have gotten used to cheap dollars, they want the naira value to the dollar value to be 1 naira to $1. Right? Because that will enable them to import. That will enable them to go to pilgrimages cheaply. That will enable them to do all sorts of things, send kids to school abroad. But you are not producing in your own economy. So the conundrum is this: the central bank is now faced with a political problem that people react very negatively when they feel that the price of the dollar is getting very high. And so the central bank is tempted to do what has been happening in recent times, trying to artificially maintain the value of the naira to the dollar. And when this happens, further and further economic destruction is taking place in the long term. And you wonder why our GDP per capita is not $10,000, why it is $2,000. For the past 50 years, our GDP per capita's average is 1,000. I mean, this is a crying shame. So the point I'm trying to make is this: we need to restructure our economy for production and export, and that is how we will find the true value of the naira. Otherwise, the central bank will continue to be the forex market in Nigeria today. The value of the naira is on steroids from central bank interventions. If the central bank does not intervene every week or every few days, the value of the naira to the dollar will drop. This is an artificial scenario, and that means we are not really making progress. It is politically convenient. People will turn around and say, well, things are now stable, but fundamentally, no progress is being made.
I got about 1 minute for you to give us 3 key recommendations, top recommendations on the present state of the economy. Turnaround.
First of all, I believe that the economy of Nigeria should become job number 1 for political leaders. That means that people who are in political power should be people who understand economics, should be people who understand political economy and how to create jobs. Jobs, 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 jobs. So how do you create jobs? There are two things that must happen for us to abolish the 30 million unemployment problem we have in Nigeria. Number one is that we must create a massive, I've recommended the creation of a massive public-private venture capital fund of minimum 500 billion naira. This will give, invest in small businesses and enable small businesses to obtain capital. Jobs are created mainly through entrepreneurship. This is what happens in most capitalist economies. So, but people need access to capital. That's number one. But number two is that there is a systemic pipeline that is creating unemployment in this country, and that is our educational system. Our educational system today is not fit for purpose. It is generating people who don't have the skills that are necessary for productive enterprise, and we must move to vocational skills. We must move more to technological subjects. We must move more to entrepreneurship in our educational system. So I originally studied law, but I believe there are too many lawyers in Nigeria, and I've said it. They just make a lot of trouble.
I thought you don't talk about too many journalists in Nigeria. Hang around. Please hold on. From Central Bank, Deputy Governor, Professor Kingsley Moghalu, exclusive interview here on Channels Television. We'll be right back into. Let's chart to reading for leading with Professor Kingsley Moghalu, former Deputy Central Bank Deputy Governor, now the founder and president of the Institute for Governance and Economic Transformation. Thank you very much for sticking by. So what books are you reading at the moment, and what are you writing?
Well, I'm reading, first of all, a book written by James Robinson and Darren Acemoglu. These are two professors at Harvard and MIT. And that book is called Why Nations Fail: The Origins of Power, Poverty, and Prosperity.
Why are all of you folks reading this book? I've spoken to a few professors, and all of them seem to be reading this book, Why Nations Succeed and Why Nations Fail.
Because, you see, if you want good governance, if you want leadership that is transformational, that moves people from prosperity, from poverty to prosperity, which I think is the challenge we face in Nigeria, you've got to try to understand what's the secret sauce. Why are some nations rich and some others are poor? So when you read books like this, you understand why. This particular book, for example, talks a lot about institutions. Independent institutions are a very essential prerequisite for the prosperity of any nation, because they create a level playing field for, economic activity, and even to protect the citizen from the excessive power of the state. So you find how this book talks about how several societies have achieved prosperity by creating strong institutions. Let me give you a practical example in Nigeria. In Nigeria today, we talked about foreign exchange conundrums, right? And the central bank's role in forex policy has been a bit controversial in recent times. One of the weaknesses, or one of the regrets we have, personally I have, is to find that the Central Bank of Nigeria over the last few years, certainly since mid-2014, has not been independent. I've made this position very clear on the record. And that's one of the reasons that our economy is in such a terrible shape today. So
go back to the beginning of our conversation about leadership.
Yes.
What should Nigeria's leaders, political leaders, be reading and why?
So they should be reading books like Why Nations Fail, to find out why, as politicians, they should not be interfering in institutions such as the central bank. They should find out why they should not be interfering in institutions such as the Securities and Exchange Commission, such as the EFCC. They should find out why they should simply provide leadership and allow technocrats to do their job. Don't interfere in the judiciary. So they should be reading these kinds of books. I would also recommend a book that is very, very important, I think, to our situation. And that is this book, Emerging Africa: How the Global Economy's Last Frontier Can Prosper and Matter. I happen to have written it. Just an accident. But I think it's a very important book for our readers.
I'm not going to read it by accident. The final question, and you got about 1 minute. What are you writing?
Ooh.
Give me an idea of what... yes.
I am working on a new book. And I think that's all I'll say at this point.
Oh, thank you. That's very, very new. And we'll have another conversation some other time about this. A very insightful, exclusive here with Nigeria's former one of Nigeria's former deputy governor at the Central Bank of Nigeria and the founder and president of the Institute for Good Governance and Economic Transformation.